going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby here with Emer Cuzzy. Today we are going to talk about the deepest position in this draft class because there are 16 names.
Yeah, there are.
And 4 honorable mentions, and all of them could be day 2 plus picks.
Yeah.
It's an incredible class of wide receivers. The fantasy relevance, the instant impact. There's so many names to go through. A ton of names that we just couldn't leave off and had to talk about.
Yeah, there's 20 total guys on this list. You know, like they're all going to be third round or better guys to me. Maybe some of them slip into the fourth round, but they're not supposed to be there, right? Their grade would be higher. They just go to teams that, you know, might like you just have so many options. Like you can't take all of these guys in the first 3 rounds, basically. But all of them are well deserving of being top 2 round guys. Middle of the third at the latest for any of these guys on this list.
Yeah, a ton of different styles, ton of production.
Mm-hmm.
Not many guys hurt themselves in the combine process. But yeah, let's just kind of get right into it. We'll start with the honorable mentions. We got Brendan Rice, son of Jerry Rice, our all-time best receiver in football. Roman Wilson, Johnny Wilson, and Jamari Thrash.
Yeah.
4 different stories, different names, reasons why they're here. Kind of give us a little bit about each one and why they weren't able to.
Brendan Rice kind of fits the mold of like a bigger, you know, run down the field receiver. I was expecting to be more impressed, actually, funny enough. I think that's kind of maybe me overselling his name. But Caleb Williams, quarterback for USC, helped him out a lot. There's some plays that Caleb just drops dimes into his, you know, right on stride, you know, 60-yard plays and stuff. Brendan Rice, one thing I really liked is, you know, Caleb Williams moves a lot in the backfield. Sometimes it's a little hard to figure out where he's going to go. He was always moving, trying to find open areas, very comfortable in space with that after the plays break down. He was not the main guy, though, at USC. Another guy in this draft, Taj Washington, was like the main receiver for them, had the more yards. And he's more of a scat, like a smaller guy, slot guy, Taj is. And so Brendan kind of played outside and was the big over-the-top guy. But, yeah, so I just think, you know, he's a solid player, good hands. He was, 71.7% and 33 receptions for 427 yards in deep passes, which is really solid. High reception rate. But yeah, just a guy that needed to be talked about. Not going to wow you in any way, but definitely fun to have on your team.
Right. And then starting off next, we got Roman Wilson out of Michigan. He was the number 1 receiving option for a very run-heavy team. He's a very popular name, but obviously he doesn't crack our list for a list of things. Give us a little bit about him.
So he's Mr. Consistent for Michigan. Good player. Not necessarily the biggest guy, you know. Made some pretty solid. He has great hands. Made some spectacular catches at times. Had a really good Senior Bowl. Not everybody on this list had a great Senior Bowl. That's a big thing actually on this list that we'll talk about. But he just wasn't necessarily amazing at anything. He's an okay route runner. He, like I said, he has great hands. That's probably his biggest aspect. But not a big guy. Versatile though, can play in the slot, can play out wide, gonna help a team. Good athleticism. Not going to help you as a blocker in the run game. Just a normal guy. Definitely, he dropped 1 pass this last year. So that was good to see. But I'm not able to put him above some of the other guys because they are just so much more put together, explosive, and athletic and things like that. So I wouldn't see him as a number 1 at any point in his career, but he could be a really good number 2 or number 3.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, and then one guy that you're familiar with that might have hurt his draft stock this year more than anybody else. He was a preseason flirting with a first-round pick.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now he could be flirting with a day 3 pick. Johnny Wilson, he actually has a teammate that will be on our rankings. We'll talk about in a little bit. Tell us a little bit about him and why he's kind of fallen out of our top 16.
Well, I think it's fun to talk about the fact that he's 6'7", 240. He has the frame and size that is fun, but hasn't necessarily worked at the NFL level in the past. But yeah, you want the jump ball guy. You want the guy that's going to go get it. This is kind of him. Kind of. He has way too many drops. That's his biggest problem by far. He needs to improve on the drops. He has not gotten better in that case. I don't know why. I was surprised by it, I guess, more so than anything, because I saw him drop the ball a few times, but then I went and looked at the numbers and I was like, wow, like consistently 10% bad. So that's a big problem. And you run into a lot of the same things that you'd expect to run into with like a big guy. Doesn't have release packages. He's always kind of covered, but he's always got a guy on his hip because he's not necessarily going to run away from anybody until it's like 20, 30 yards down the field and then his legs start actually going. And that's not necessarily going to help you. He doesn't have super good quickness, but he does have a little bit of nuance in his routes. All of his routes don't look the same. He does a good job running off the line, I guess, where he presses deep and then comes back to the ball and stuff. But yeah, he just has a lot of issues that keep him outside the top 16 guys.
Gotcha. And then last but not least, Jamari Thrash of Louisville. He's probably the least known name of the four due to the school he's been to. But tell us why we had to mention him.
Because he is twitchy and explosive. And he is one of these like skinny, smaller guys that just kind of in and out of breaks, runs awesome routes, and he can run all the routes. That's another thing that I think is overlooked at times. Being able to truly be able to run all the routes on the route tree, willingness to run in the middle of the field, those types of things. He had one of the worst contested catch rates, though, at 15.8%. That's a problem when you're a receiver, obviously, but also like when you don't have the size and other things, you have to figure out how to catch the ball and move, like transition your body. They didn't have a bad quarterback at Louisville. It wasn't like that situation. Had 8 drops this season. 11% of his passes that's a lot. He's one of those like twitchy athletes that's really good, but you kind of worry about him. Is he too small? Is he going to get knocked off when he runs routes? Is he actually going to catch the ball? Is he, because when he gets the ball in his hands, he turns into a running back. He's great at yards after the catch. All of a sudden, you're a little bit worried about, is he going to take it to the house? But before that, it's like, okay, can we get the ball to this guy? Can he actually get the ball in his hands? So that's kind of my thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, we'll kick off our rankings, number 16. We're going to start off with Malik Washington. He's somebody we, like Emery said right before we start recording, we couldn't leave him off.
Yeah.
Just look at the numbers, grades out of the charts. Had a great combine. He is smaller. He is a little bit older, but fantastic year out of Virginia.
Yeah, he's basically your typical slot receiver, which sometimes has a hard time impacting at the next level and like transitioning. But at the same time, I mean, he's a competitor. He's the best player. He was by far the best player on the Virginia football team to me. 110 catches, 1,426 yards. That was third among all players, I believe. It's in the top 5. I can't remember exactly what number, but I believe it was third of all players. NCAA, 4.47, solid 40 time. Nothing like to go crazy about, but basically checked off a box.
Mm-hmm.
He had the most receptions this year. 91. The 91.1 PFF grade for third was awesome. Almost 90 in his man coverage. I mean, he does everything right. It's the problem is, the things that we all see on the board. Like when you're like, I flip to this page, you're gonna be like, well, he's 5'8". Oh, he's almost 24. Yeah, well, you're right. Yeah. But you're gonna get a good football player. So at the same time, it's like, are you going to let that affect you? Because he had a 42.5-inch vertical at 5'8". Mm-hmm. So it's still like he's still athletic. He still shows off that athleticism. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. He went to what's called the Shrine Bowl because you can't take everybody to the Senior Bowl, and there's so many good receivers. So at the Shrine Bowl, he was the best player, but basically the best player there. Yeah, he's got high IQ. He can run every route, nuanced route running out of the slot. 2.6% drop rate. 64.7% contested catch rate at 5'8".
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's part of that 42-inch vertical right there. Mm-hmm. So, I could not leave this guy off the list. Needs to be more buzz, basically, is how I look at it. This guy needs to be more talked about because he is exceptional. Mm-hmm. Versus the guys on the honorable mentions list, which they have some issues. I didn't see as many issues with him. I just know that people are going to be like, well, the issues are on the board right there. Right?
Yeah, and every year we just kind of text each other some of the names in the later rounds that we think might kind of become steals, or
right.
He depending on where he goes, because we are higher on him, might go on that list because of how well he just has produced, and he's just a great football player, just undersized and older.
My favorite player that I ever we texted about was Max Crosby. Yeah. It'll never change. It'll always be my favorite. Oakland fan or Las Vegas fan, Oakland at that point, I think. Yeah. So that's good. But yeah, being a Las Vegas fan, Max Crosby was the best text I ever got. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah, so we'll crack into our top 15. Next up, we got Jalen Polk, one of the many receivers in this, the 3 receivers that will be drafted from Washington.
Yeah.
He was the one that kind of jumped off the page the most, or he had the most production, at least in the college football playoff when they were made their national championship run. Tell us a little bit about him, and was he a product of his environment, or is he somebody that can really truly separate himself now that he's?
So we talked. Go watch the quarterback show because, like Cam said, there's 3 wide receivers. 2 of them on this list. Jalen McMillan did not make the list, but that's okay. Still a good player. Just didn't make it on this list. Still going to be a top 4 round guy probably. But I will say that he bailed his quarterback out a good amount. Jalen Polk made some plays in the contested catch area of that saved Michael Penix a little bit. I remember a play to the sideline, probably 25 yards down the field, double coverage, one high, one low. Jalen Polk just jumps up, snags it over the defender, saves a pick. It's just, he's a very good in that aspect, but he definitely lacks some athleticism. Mm-hmm. Of course, a 37.5 vertical, 10.9 broad, that's good. It's really good. 4.52 40, very solid. But he doesn't necessarily have the agility and the bend the same way that some guys do in this class. I do love that he is like a junkyard dog. He was willing to run across the middle of the field. He'll take hits. He doesn't care. He gives his body. That's fun. Putting his body on the line for sure is something that he does. But I think he'll forever be a number 2. And he was a number 2 in the Washington offense. And guess what? He did great.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Totally okay.
Yeah. We all need good number 2s.
Honestly, on the NFL level, if you don't have 3 really good options, then you kind of struggle.
Right.
So, yeah, nothing to sneeze at. That's your upside, but he's very productive.
He can play both slot and out wide. He had about 50-50 for snaps. Mm-hmm. And then one other thing I want to add before we move on. He had 14 deep catches, which was 8th in the NCAA this year. So,
gotcha. So moving on, we got Malachi Corley, small school, but he was first team All Conference USA. Did not participate in the combine. just somebody that's kind of been middle of the pack the entire pre-draft process. But tell us why he stands out to us.
So he's actually one of those guys that I wish I could put higher. I really want to put higher, but there are some glaring concerns. He has some amazing stats. So he has the lowest ADOT by far, 5.5 yards. Second most screen receptions in the nation, 40 of them. Okay. Basically what happened was they said Malachi Corley came in to Western Kentucky. He was a cornerback. And they said, hey, come play offense. What position do you want to play? Oh, I'll be running back. Okay, you're a running back. And then they were like, no, I think we'll put you at receiver. So it took them 3 positions to figure out where to put Malachi Corley. But when he gets the ball in his hands, he plays like a running back. All of a sudden, you're like, what's going to happen? Because not only did he have the lowest ADOT, but he also had the biggest difference in yards. So I do this I like looking at ADOT versus yards per reception. So yards per reception for him was over 12 yards per reception. His average depth of target was 5.5. That's a 7-yard difference. So normally that tells me kind of yards, the yards after catch, but in a different way. He had a 7 yards after catch per catch. So, or per target, I guess, which is huge. I mean, that's an awesome number. So he's so good with the ball in his hands. Can he get open? That's the problem. Because with him, he feels so much like a gadget guy that could bust because he doesn't have nuanced route running. He doesn't have great releases. He has trouble with that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff we want to see when you come out of college. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's great to be able to run the routes or run with the ball after the catch, but you have to get the ball. And that's why he's 14th and not higher, because he just might not be able to get the ball.
Right. Yeah. I mean, basically, he's Deebo Samuel light.
Yes, Deebo Samuel-esque.
And not every offense can utilize that to the best of their abilities. I mean, you see very talented, just all-around football players like D'Anthony Thomas or Percy Harvin, who just kind of struggled at the NFL level to have long sustained production,
right?
Just because it was hard to place them anywhere, and they weren't advanced, like you said, route runners getting open. And it's unless I throw you a screen and you can just go for 20 plus yards every time, it's kind of like you're not helping the offense as much as you probably should be.
Right. And so that's my biggest worry with him is he's one of the guys that I think could be the biggest bust of all these guys because of the fact that he just doesn't have that ability.
Right. So. But also, I don't know if he's going high enough to where, if you are the bust, then it's what am I missing?
Right.
One that I was high on in a recent draft was Calvin Austin, just because he went to Pittsburgh and they just mid-round receivers, they just always seem to get it right. And so I was like, oh yeah, slot receiver for, that was right after Antonio Brown left. And so I was like, okay, he's going to step into a lot of targets, and he just really has not been very good. But that's okay. It was a 4th round pick, not the end of the world. Moving on, Ricky Pearsall, he's a guy that a lot of analysts like as a mid-round sleeper. Doesn't have eye-popping numbers, but he is a really, really, polished player at the receiver position.
Yeah.
So, and he is a little bit older. He was a late bloomer. So, tell us a little bit about him and why he's at 13.
So, we have another guy on this list later, but he's like the Walmart version of him. Ricky Pearsall is a great route runner, great hands. Basically, knows how to get open, knows how to catch the ball. Not going to do anything special like yards after the catch, but he ran a 4.41, which is really good. We didn't expect that actually. He jumped to 42. So my concerns were, is he athletic enough to do this? Well, he's athletic enough. As you can see by the picture, he can make that catch was amazing. Y'all should go watch that catch. Honestly, It was an incredible catch. So, he's just a really good player, and he's definitely not a number one. He's not an alpha by any means, but a number 2 would be a lot of fun to have or number 3 even, which probably is better for him. He can play in the slot. He can play out wide. My biggest thing is, can he, he has to be more productive, but he played in Florida's offense. But can he, actually get to the point where most analysts are projecting him? They're putting him above guys that I'm like, that guy is so much more athletic and has such better production and projection. He's done it, and he has better projection. Why are you putting him above him? Because he did really well at the Senior Bowl? Because he did okay at the Combine? I don't get it to that point.
Yeah, I mean, this class is so deep that you can't just overly assume that the Senior Bowl and Combine is just going to vault somebody into a fringe first rounder. And, we've seen him in, early second rounds and stuff like that, which, to me, is too high by a round, maybe.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean that he can't be productive on the next level. It's just, once you start putting that kind of draft capital on somebody, then you have expectation. And there are, when you do bust, there are, I guess, ramifications, or you're not painted in as great of a picture.
Right. I have I just wrote this when I was looking at him. Pearsall is a guy with a solid floor, but lacks the elite traits to become a number 1 in any offense. That was pretty much what I still think. Has a great floor, should be a long-time player, never going to be elite. And I think that's fair.
Yeah, it is fair. But at the same time, we see many number 1s come in the late second round, even early or late first round as well. Obviously, he shouldn't go that high, but round 2 is still where wide receiver 1s come off the board, and he's now in that range. So now we have to tie the expectation, I said earlier, if you're putting in a round 1, round 2 range, you need to become a number 1 in an offense. And if you can't even be the second option on your team, that's a tough pill to swallow for an early second round pick.
Exactly. So
next up, we're going to go Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. Obviously, Bama was kind of wide receiver U for a little while, and since probably 2021, when Devontae Smith came out, they really haven't had the next guy stand up and then into the wide receiver 1 first round pick territory. But Jermaine Burton was a very solid player, with the little receptions he had, 20 yards a catch, downfield threat, all that good stuff. But he just kind of hasn't stood out we have seen in recent years from Alabama receivers.
Yeah, so Jermaine Burton, that also has a little bit to do with the fact that their quarterback is not necessarily built to throw the ball like that. But, Jermaine Burton was actually really good this year. 39 receptions, 798 yards. That is a lot of yards for not very many receptions. His average depth of target was 20.2, which is by far the highest. He had 8 touchdowns, so he was, cashing in touchdowns at almost 25%. Or 20%. But yeah, so 39 receptions on 57 targets. Both of those numbers are probably the lowest of all these guys. Has a lot to do with the scheme and how they played at Alabama this year, but quick, twitchy athlete. His 4.45 from the Combine, I actually thought he would have been faster because he was fast on film.
He's faster than.
Yeah, he was very fast on film. 11.1 broad, breaking that 11 threshold is awesome. But yeah, he's a good player. One of his best things is his 10-yard split, 1.53. There's other guys on this list that run faster 40s that had a lower split. So that's always good to see. His capability to throttle at the top of his routes when he gets into corners and make breaks and stuff is uncanny at times. He makes people spin in circles, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, he's never... Basically, Jermaine Burton is possibly a top 8 guy in most drafts, and he's 12 here. So it kind of tells you about the depth in this class because he was really good when he got the ball in his hands and did things. Just 23 years old. It's a little scary sometimes, but he's a good football player. So yeah.
Now we'll move on to number 11. We got Xavier Legette. He's one of the few that has kind of dropped from where we had him initially. He was well within our top 10. Now he's fallen just outside. He has the production. He is a little bit older, good size. Tell us a little bit about him and why he's kind of fallen a little bit in our eyes.
Well, we kind of expected him to come in at 6'3", and then all of a sudden, that was a false accusation, and he was only 6'1". So that was a little shocking when we at the Senior Bowl when they were like, "Oh, he's 6'1". I was like, "Oh, well, that's a little bit different when you say a burner is 6'3", freak athlete." I mean, he still does other things. He's still only 2 inches shorter. Don't get me wrong. It's not that big of a deal, but it was a little bit surprising. He, 4.39 40. That's sub 4.4 is always very, exceptional. He's a little bit older, late bloomer. Basically, in 2023, he had more yards than all of his other years in college. More touchdowns, more receptions, all his other years in college. So that was obviously something that, you kind of have to worry about. I love seeing 2-year sample sizes more than a 1-year guy that goes off. I think the best comparison to him is like not ability wise, but like how he plays and things is AJ Brown. Mm-hmm. That same size, that same physicality, willing to run over the middle, but not necessarily that good. I mean, AJ Brown is an exceptional football player. Was exceptional coming out, better than DK. Let's be honest, guys. Ole Miss, but yeah, always was. And so I think that that's the style of play. Has that speed and things like that. Breakaway speed is insane. Catches the ball and all of a sudden is teleporting past you. But yeah, it was surprising to see him so that he was 6'1" and that he only he was not very good at the Senior Bowl compared to the other guys around him, which I kind of expected him to do really well. Right. So that kind of took a little step back.
Yeah, and I mean, being 11th, it seems like, oh, he's really like he's still a very good player that would be flirting with the top 5 as a top 5 prospect.
Yeah,
at the position other years. It's just so deep, and you have to make some decisions. And he's one of the few that has not stood out in the pre-draft process, right? And that's why he's kind of fallen compared to others.
Mel Kiper put him in the first round of this last draft, so it's not
while that's ridiculous, that doesn't mean that he has support.
Yeah, exactly. There's reason.
There's people that like him.
Yeah. 6 out of his 12 games, he had 100 plus yards, and then he had one game of 200 plus yards. Not like he wasn't productive. Not like he can't do it. It's just consistency. Obviously, is a problem. He was a special teamer basically 4 years, and then all of a sudden, his 5th year, he goes off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he has a lot of good attributes. Also, I'm just not willing to put him above a lot of the guys that we're about to talk about.
Right. So, yeah, we'll jump into our top 10 now. Next, we have Xavier Worthy, who you guys might be a little surprised that he's this low. 3 years of production at Texas. Yeah. He was a productive, true freshman. He is young, 21. He set the 40-time record. That is something that people are going to hold on to. One of the big things is that he was an all-American return specialist. So he has that ability in his game as well. There's just a little bit not too many, but there are a lot more red flags than I think people lead on to. And now he's kind of really bolted off draft boards because of his 40 time and whatnot. And I just feel like it's too high for us.
I just don't think you should. I guess we kind of made this case on the Risers and Fallers video. It's like we knew he was fast. Mm-hmm. We didn't know he was 4.21 fast, yes, but we knew he was sub 4.3 fast. And so we can be honest. I mean, he killed the combine. 41-inch vert, 10-11 broad, 1.49 10-yard split. That means he was just booking it. But he's 5'11", 165. I mean, I hope he's moving pretty quick at that size.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his teammate. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Being 6'2", 220, running a 4.34. To us, that's actually more impressive.
Yes, absolutely.
Because like you're playing it with the game weight. We don't see a lot of 165-pound, which he'll probably put on 10 pounds to be in the NFL. But usually, that small of a receiver does not pan out on the next level. And on top of that, he's had a lot of drop issues in his history. He did clean that up a little bit, but even this year being probably his best overall season, I mean, PFF grade was not impressive. 341st in the country. Yeah, that's top 30%, but for a top 25 pick, it doesn't stand out.
So I wrote this down. It says Texas's big play guy, ? Because in 2023, he had a 10.3 average depth of target. The fastest guy in football had a 10.3 yard average depth of target. Jermaine Burton had double that. So it kind of tells me like maybe he wasn't used correctly, first off, which is fine. Then I can deal with that. But the other thing is, why didn't we see him just like catch the ball in the middle of the field and all of a sudden be scoring a touchdown 80 yards down the field?
Yeah, when I think of a guy that you just purely fear based on speed, like a Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Jackson, guys like that, it's like you can see it. Like the 4.21, we were so surprised because I don't feel like he plays at a 4.21.
No, probably not.
And he's still fast, but like you said, when he gets the ball, I don't think that on any time he touches the ball, he's just going to take it. And that's concerning when you have now people faulting you as a first round pick. Like that comes with the expectation that you need to be flirting with 1,000 yards every year.
Right.
16, 17 yards a catch because you're, every third, fourth game you're catching 50-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
And you don't see enough of that.
Well, it's also like you got to think. You add those concerns, and then you add, and you're only like 170 pounds.
Yes.
So every time you go up against anybody, not just the number one cornerbacks in the league, anybody, and they put their hands on you coming off the line, you're not able to like make your moves. You lose a yard, you move a yard every time. It throws off timing, things like that. He didn't play as fast, and it has a little bit to do with the fact that if he did get touched, he slowed down, So I'm a little worried I'm definitely not putting him above the other 9 guys. Like the other 9 guys are kind of, there's a tier break.
Oh, yeah. I think he is in that.
Xavier Worthy, Legette, and Jermaine Burton are in a tier together to me. I think they all
Which is saying something because they're very separated in terms of draft value for most people because, Jermaine Burton is probably a 3rd round pick.
Right.
Xavier Worthy, people are saying should be the 4th or 5th receiver off the board. That's a big, big difference. Even though it's a class that has a bunch of talent, it's not like it's a jumbled like 2 through 10. There are, like you said, tier breaks.
Oh, yeah.
He is in that next tier to us.
We'll talk about some tier breaks.
Could be a fabulous return man.
Yeah.
Do well in that. But being a just pure wide receiver, there's some concerns there.
Absolutely.
But moving on, we're going to go into Keon Coleman, who, like we said, Johnny Wilson, his teammate. Very impressive, incredible size. He's young. He fell a little bit just because he was not the most athletic at the combine.
Yeah.
But, he's also just a guy that does it all.
Yeah.
And he stands out because on top of, having, abilities as a receiver, he has size as well.
Well, yeah, he was also, first team All-ACC all-purpose player, first team All-ACC return specialist. Yeah, he gives you lots of different things when you draft him. My biggest thing is I watched Florida State a lot, and maybe I'm more critical. Maybe that's a little bit of it. But he disappears. I remember this very vividly, but we're playing against Boston College. Okay. And I think it's like week 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
No catches, no yards, no touchdowns. 0, 0, 0 across the board for our best receiver. For our guy we need. That game was a 1-score game. It was like
that was
so close. Well, I thought we were going to lose that game because it was over. No, maybe. I don't remember exactly. I watched a lot of football this year, but I believe it was so close. It was a 3-point game or something like that. And our best receiver is nowhere to be found. And of course, I'm definitely critical of him. The first week of the year, we watched the game together against LSU. Had to keep turning it off because when I watched it, it was not going well. But when we turned it off, it was great. So, bad juju. But he was electric, and he was the best player on our team at that point. I mean, he had 9 receptions for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. But he also had 5 games of less than 24 yards. Just disappears. And I need more consistency out of him because, yes, he ran a 4.61. He was the number 4 overall receiver on the board when grades came out at the end of the season, and I disagreed because I was like, this is such a deep class. There's no way. There's not a guy better when he's not there all the time. And not just that, he lacks a little bit of separation because he's one of those guys that thinks he's open when he's not open. And at times he is. I mean, you've seen amazing one-handed catches from this guy. He makes the spectacular plays. Don't let those define him, though, because all of a sudden he's trying to do that. And he's contested catch is 33.3%. Well, okay, great. You made one-handed catch, but the other 2 balls, they fell to the ground.
Right.
But he's 6'3" and very good athlete. So it's very optimal player, just needs to work on a lot of consistency.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different style of play, but it's kind of similar in terms of the production, like you said, and consistency, like Gabe Davis.
Right.
How, he made basically his $39 million contract came from having 4 touchdowns and 200 yards in the AFC Championship game. Or AFC divisional game, in the 13-second game against Kansas City. Just incredible. However, way too often when he's playing close to 100% of the snaps, when you are playing nearly 100% of the snaps, and I don't notice you the entire game, that's a problem, especially a receiver. And so with him, he will go for a 98-yard touchdown, and then it will take him 4 games to get more than 2 catches.
Right.
And Keon kind of, to me, has more upside than that.
Yes.
However,
absolutely.
You don't want to fall into that trap because all of a sudden we see guys that get paid and then just immediately get considered like not living up to the hype. Like that's the concern you have for those kinds of players.
Right. So let me just be honest. If the Jaguars draft Keon Coleman in the 2nd round and don't sign Gabe Davis, it's a much better situation.
Yes.
So that's a big thing here. Like, I'm not saying Keon Coleman's a bad football player. He's a great football player with inconsistencies. And he needs to brush those up because he didn't run a fast 40. But what he did really well is if y'all watch the gauntlet drill, which is the one where you catch the ball, you spin, you catch it, and then you run down the line and catch balls coming from both directions. The trick of that drill is to run straight down the line. And Keon Coleman ran the fastest of any player, like speed-wise, down that line. 18 miles per hour or something, while catching balls coming from both directions. So game speed I mean, 40 speed isn't always what game speed is. He's much faster game speed wise, but at the same time, he has a capped speed overall. He's a really good player. I just need great hands. I just need more consistency. Age is obviously possibly the biggest problem with that. Maybe as he grows older, he's only 21.2. He will increase on that. But yeah, that's my biggest problem. I mean, he was a great basketball player too. Like he's a great athlete, all around athlete. So the athleticism isn't the issue. It's just the consistency.
Moving on, we're going to go Troy Franklin at number 8 out of Oregon. Fantastic production for them this year. Over 1,300 yards and 14 scores. He's got great size. He's a little thin, but he's young. He really impressed at the combine. Tell us a little bit more about him And I know he's a guy that's getting fringe first-round consideration for us as well.
So he impressed time-wise at the combine, but he did not look comfortable running routes. If you watch his routes, there's a lot of times he slips in his breaks and things that I just wish he would have done better. The combine was his opportunity during the field work to show scouts that he could make plays other than I can run deep. And he didn't do a very good job of that. So that's why he's actually fallen in our rankings overall. But he's a good player. 9 out of 13 games, 100 plus yards, 14 touchdowns. He has a little bit of a smaller frame for his height, 176 pounds. He probably plays at 185, 190. Still smaller for his height. Pretty good. He's really good at man coverage. He had a really good quarterback throwing him the ball. A lot of nice things to say about the Oregon offense, of course. Ran really well. He had the same yards per route, minus ADOT, to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. So kind of, if you want to relate names in this draft class, there's some like relationships there. Not the same, obviously, but did really well. Biggest problem: 10% drop rate.
Mm-hmm.
As a guy that didn't have necessarily crazy routes and things like that, where the ball is like being placed in different situations, you got to catch the ball. 10% drop rate. Hurting his quarterback, who could have had the greatest completion percentage of all time.
Yeah,
easily.
And, I mean, you see the production there. Like, imagine what it would have been if that drop rate's cut in half.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Like average.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he just needed to play better at times. Not play better. He catch the ball more, but he played great overall. He needed to kill the pre-draft, and he didn't do that. That was his biggest thing. So yeah.
Yeah, so moving on, we're going to go Devontez Walker out of UNC. He is probably, of all of these groups, the truest of being a prospect because, doesn't have the impressive numbers. He's older, but, he can be fun to watch. And he obviously showed through his combine numbers that he's even faster than we thought, too.
So my biggest thing with Tez is he did not look good at the Senior Bowl, right? And it wasn't that he wasn't winning. That was the biggest problem. I watched the analysts talk about it over and over and over, and I was getting so irritated because I wanted them to talk about the fact that he was winning his releases and separating and dropping the ball. Because he dropped the ball so many times at the Senior Bowl. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. But that's fine because he didn't do that during the season. He didn't drop the ball during the season. 3% drop rate. I 3 drops all of 2023. 3 drops all of 2023. He had 7 at the Senior Bowl alone. So I was kind of annoyed that the analysts were talking about that so much because he was winning on every he was separating. He's one of the best deep threats in this class. I mean, we have an electric, crazy deep threat later, but one of the best deep threats in this class. 4.36. Good at breaking his routes off. My big thing too is we talked about he missed a bunch of games this year. Still third team All ACC. But the reason I kind of want to talk about him because at North Carolina, I don't think they used him correctly. He was literally just used to throw the ball deep. It was how did the defender play me basically? Him and Drake May, right? Defender's off, he runs at him. Defender's bailing, I'm gonna stop. Throw me the ball. Defender's off. He stands pat. I run past him, throw me the ball. That was kind of how he played. But before this, when he was at Kent State, he was a gadget guy. He was not this deep threat. So we got to see a little bit of both of Devontez Walker, which was cool. Getting to see his intermediate routes, his short routes, how he had more nuance in his route running. I mean, because they did not do that at North Carolina. He missed 5 games. Like I said at the beginning of the year, not injury. It was actually NCAA not allowing him to play, which was a whole thing, obviously, in its own right. but comes in first game from second game back, 6 receptions, 132 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So ability is there, speed is there, but I guess he's not higher on this list because there's so many good players, and the next few players are just gonna kind of be blow it away kind of guys, and so this is where he lands at 7.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of firmly been in the 7-8 range throughout the whole time. Mm-hmm. Some guys have moved in front, some guys have moved back, but he's kind of just stayed in the same, what is this, the third tier of receivers? So he's firmly in that tier, but it's just kind of like your preference on who is like stepped up or who stepped back. But yeah, moving on, Ladd McConkey, one of our favorite prospects, dealt with some injuries this year, but he absolutely blew us away at the combine, and he's just one of those guys that all of a sudden he could have one of the best productive careers of this entire draft class.
So this is the guy that we were talking about earlier. This is the Sam's version of Ricky Pearsall, or whatever you want to say, like the better version of Ricky Pearsall. Let's just be very honest. Ladd McConkey is the best route runner in this class by far. He is the best possession slot receiver style player in this class. And we knew that. Going into everything, watching him at the Senior Bowl, watching him run routes, he just is better than everybody else. Just natural, just amazing route runner. Gets annoyed with himself when his route looks the same as the other one, right? Then he ran a 4.39.
Yes. And
we were like, okay, hold on.
Yeah. I mean, for full perspective, when betting lines came out for over-unders of his was
4.5.
4.54 or something along those lines. So he absolutely blew it out of the water. And we knew he was quick to begin with, but we thought it was just more side to side.
Yeah.
But now we know he has straight line speed too.
Yeah, he was that actually kind of, out of all the risers and all the fallers, that rose him the most because I knew he could do everything else. Mm-hmm. I did not know he could do that. Right? I knew he could run the routes, I knew he could do all the other stuff. I knew he was a good athlete, whatever. I did not know he could run that fast. Because that allows him to change the game in a different way that he couldn't before. Mm-hmm. Missing 5 games this year, we didn't get to see it as much. I'm sure if he would have played, he would have been pretty awesome. But yeah, we didn't get to see it as much, which was sad. And it was because Georgia was the best team this year. I don't care what anybody thinks. They lost to Alabama, whatever. 9 times out of 10, they beat Alabama. They lost that day, to me personally. But having Ladd McConkey on the field that whole time, too, would have just made it that much better. Brock Bowers playing, Amarius Mims playing. Those guys didn't even play. They're all top 5 guys, top 6 guys in our positional rankings per position. So I just think, we missed out on seeing, Ladd McConkey run routes against college players, basically. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, and also, we thought that after the combine, he would firmly solidify himself as a first-round pick. And I'm actually surprised that updated mocks that have come out since the combine, he still hasn't hit that territory yet, which is a little confusing because there's so many teams that need receivers in the back half of the first.
It's also that we're watching analysts put receivers that probably shouldn't be above him in those positions. I'm okay with the fact that if you want to be okay, only 5 receivers are going to make the first round, and you don't put Ladd McConkey in there, that's fine.
But when you're putting 7,
you have to put Ladd McConkey in the first round. What are you doing?
So, but yeah, so we'll crack our top 5. These guys are 5 that we feel as though have solidified themselves as first round pick.
Yeah.
Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. He went to Georgia, and then his single year at Texas, he was a do-it-all player, and his numbers don't jump off the board, but he shows up in the biggest moments, and that's who gets the targets when the game is on the line, and more often than not, he's come through.
I think with him, if you watch the film, you actually want more. You really do want more, but at the same time, it's but then you get it when it's like a tie game, you're like, this is where AD gets the ball. 4.34 40. That was crazy because we did not expect that.
Yeah, another one that just blew out of the water.
Yeah, but I mean we probably saw a 4.45 or something as his like line. Didn't expect that. That was great. 40.5 inch vertical, 11.4 broad, like just jumping out of the gym. 21.8 years old when the season starts. Like there is nothing wrong with any of that. Like all the numbers are there. I guess my biggest problem is production at times.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see it. And he had a 3.2 yards after catch, which I was hoping would be better also. But his style of play doesn't necessarily lean towards that. But at the same time, you know, opportunity-wise, he should have gotten more than that to me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, to me, I don't see ever being a number one, but being one of the better wide receiver twos in the league.
Right.
And to me, style of play, I guess is a little faster, but he's just a spitting image of T. Higgins.
Yeah, I knew what you were going to say.
Yeah. It's uncanny.
Yeah.
And obviously, if T. Higgins is moved, I would just love to see him in that role as just a compliment to a true number one, because that's to where I think he would thrive the most and get the more production that you said that you would hope for.
So you mean Buffalo Bills?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
If Diggs is there.
Well, yeah, if he stays, for sure.
So,
I do want to say one thing before we switch over. His best attribute. We just talked about big plays and big times, right? 13 out of 14 red zone targets. So he caught 13 out of the 14 red zone targets. We know exactly which one he did not catch. It was the one where he got batted down against Washington in the end zone.
Third to the bottom.
Yep. 79 yards and 13 touchdowns. 13 receptions, 13 touchdowns. Red zone. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that a lot. So that kind of tells you exactly what kind of player he is. But yeah.
Yeah. So moving on, a similar guy that also solidified himself as a first-round pick. He also has a teammate that we'll talk about in a little bit, but Brian Thomas Jr. at LSU just took the absolute top off the defense this year, and he showed it with his 4.33 40. He's got all the size you'd want. He's one that I said in an earlier video, I would not be shocked if somebody for some reason was like, I want him at 12, or he's sneaks in that range. If somebody isn't able to grab one of our top three, who are you pretty certain you know who they are,
right?
Because they've been top 10 picks this whole process. But after that, there was a big drop off in terms of where we see people drafted.
Right.
I think he was our wide receiver 4.
Oh, he's been our wide receiver 4 this whole time,
and we had him at 28.
Yeah, not as high.
But now it's like I don't see him dropping out of the top 20. So tell us a little bit more and what to expect out of Brian.
Okay, so he's not a product of his environment, if that makes sense. Neither him or Malik Nabers, his teammate. Jaden Daniels was great this year. Jaden Daniels also has a couple issues throwing the ball deep at times. Doesn't have necessarily the biggest arm. Got a good arm, not the biggest arm. And he made plays in a different way. So I don't want anybody to make the case that, Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas, Malik Nabers are all on the same team. That's why, Malik Nabers was the number 1, Brian Thomas was number 2. That is not true at all. 17 touchdowns by Brian Thomas. Most in the NCAA.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a number 1 receiver. We don't need to put him behind Malik Nabers all of a sudden because they were on the same team. 6'3", 209. Great size. 21.8. Great age. All of it's good. 7 out of 13 games for 98 plus yards. 17 touchdowns, like I said. Second highest completion percentage when target. 78% completion percentage when target.
That's incredible.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, you got to think, most quarterbacks throw about 67%. He is on the high side for helping his quarterback out.
And it's usually when you see high percentages like that, it's just most of those targets come around the line of scrimmage, and that's not his style.
No, He is the he is the best deep threat in this class. Over Malik Nabers.
78%.
Over Malik Nabers.
Yep.
Best deep threat in this class. And, the argument isn't, he's in his own tier. It's kind of funny. There's 1, 2, 3. Brian Thomas. And then Adonai Mitchell, Lad McConkey. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a separation. Because he separated himself at the combine. He separated himself this season because he made big plays in big games. I just think this guy is very special. He was already R4, like we said. Solidified it. Moved up. Mm-hmm. Great size. Great athleticism. Physicality. Physicality is awesome. One of the highest contested catch rates. Just did no wrong, Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where he falls. But he's a guy, like I said, teams view him very highly. And we've seen that in recent weeks, post combine.
Yeah,
a lot of teams like him, so we would not be surprised at all if he got drafted higher than what you'd see on most mocks, which a lot of people have him around the 18 to 20 range right now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we'll go into our top 3. These have always been the top 3. 2 and 3, we've gone back and forth on. They're 2 very, very different receivers. However, it's just kind of pick your poison with what style of receiver you want. Next, we got Odunze out of Washington, Blitnikoff Award finalist, All-American player that, he is exactly what Larry Fitzgerald was when he came out. Mm-hmm. That style of player. Maybe not as refined, but, the production's there. Just eye-popping numbers. Talk us through Odunze.
Well, you said Blitnikoff finalist. So the next 3 guys, all first-team All-Americans. Mm-hmm. All Blitnikoff finalists. One of them won it. So every single one of them was the best at this position for this year. It wasn't close to me. I mean, you can make a case that you like a guy more here between 2 and 3. I think 2 and 3 are... I almost want to compare them together because they're so different. It's like it doesn't even... Like, you need to almost see that, but like...
So then let's do that. Obviously, Malik Nabers is our number 2. Mm-hmm. Both of them will be top 10 picks.
Absolutely.
2 different styles. Malik Nabers had the number 1 PFF grade. Odunze, nothing to sneeze at, being 13th. But 1,600 yards to 1,580. 13 touchdowns to 14 touchdowns, both around 90 receptions. Like, how do you choose? If you're a team, you're the Giants. You need a receiver. How do you choose between these 2?
Well, we know how to choose for the Giants personally because they need speed. Mm-hmm. But how do you choose? I mean, I guess it's preference, obviously. There's a little bit of an age difference for Nabers. Nabers is 21 versus Odunze, who's a year older. Basically the same numbers. 3 different in receptions, 80 yards different in receiving yards, and 1 touchdown difference. The biggest difference is Nabers played 2 less games. Mm-hmm. So those numbers are a lot less. That's just he had 120 something receiving yards per game. It was freaking ridiculous. But with Odunze, you kind of have to his style is really fun because he is always going to help his quarterback. He's always going to be open in ways that
his knack for improvising is something that kind of jumps off the screen.
Yeah.
When a play breaks down, he knows how to come back and find open space.
Yeah, he fixes problems, I guess is how I put it. If you ask me, he's the best contested catch receiver in this class. I don't know. I mean, Marvin Harrison, who was a first, we'll talk about him in a little bit. He's up there with him. Odunze fits every team. It's just, do you already have a speedster? Do you already have a possession catch guy? What do you need as one thing that I thought was really funny is he is 6'3", but when I watch him play, it's almost like he feels 5'11". Like that's, you know what I mean? Like he moves in a different way than most guys that are that size, in and out of breaks. He's the best route runner, one of the better route runners in the class. Not the best, but he's one of the better route runners in the class. He just makes breaks in and out that are just like seamless for a guy that's 6'3", that's normally insanely difficult. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of my big things. 14 out of 15 games, 81 plus receiving yards. 10 out of 15, 100 plus. My biggest thing is, what do you do when you play good teams? 741 yards against 7 ranked opponents, because the Pac-12 was really good this year. That's 105 yards a game against ranked opponents. I mean, he basically has it all. Elite hands, that is actually a case that he could make, that he is the best hands in the class. Mm-hmm. I guess, I don't know, I guess if you're going to make something you dislike about him, like, he doesn't have the long speed. He's not going to be game-changing in that way, and his yak isn't as good because of it. Less explosive than Nabers, but prototypical wide receiver that's going to have a great career.
Yeah, I mean, it should. I mean, one of the guys that has been top, it's hard to rank because there's so many good receivers, but he's firmly in the top 3, DeAndre Hopkins, over the last decade. He's one of the slower receivers that you can see. He doesn't take the top off, but he plays the sideline so well. Mm-hmm. Great hands, runs routes. He's awesome that way. But he's not the guy that's going to go for 70 yards and a touchdown.
Right.
Very rarely does he do that. He's more of he's going to move the chains on 3rd and 11.
Yeah. And
that's why he's had such a great career. Odunze could be very well that type of productive receiver.
20, I think
Keenan Allen also.
Yeah, Keenan Allen. 20 contested catches, led the nation in that. I mean, he's just going to improve your team. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a number 1 receiver somewhere. I really love the idea of him going somewhere that has a complement that's got some speed.
That's why I was really, really hoping that, Chicago.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great situation for him. And now I'm less certain, because they did make the move for Keenan Allen. I think they would have been much better off in the long term going with Rome. But
it could still go. See, that's my thing.
It still very well happen, but now it just kind of seems like
muddied the water.
Yeah.
I think Rome would fit there, even in the situation that they have now. And if they don't want to pay Keenan Allen after the end of this year, then they have their receiver.
I just worry it would be something similar to Jackson Smith-Njigba, where he was the best receiver last class, and he just went to probably the worst situation for him to produce.
Right.
And so then he has an underwhelming rookie year, and because, again, they're going to go back to Tyler Lockett again, and they play some of the least 3 receiver sets, it's like you don't see a path for him. Odunze, in an offense that's already loaded, going to Chicago, it's like, all right, well, now I don't know if he's going to flirt with 1,000 yards.
Right.
And it might be a slow burn in terms of becoming that guy, because Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr. could immediately come in and be a top 20 wide receiver via production, whereas Odunze could not if it was in that situation. But if he went and he complimented Garrett Wilson, or something along those lines, I think it all is about
Mike Williams is there now, so.
Still.
Yeah.
He won't be healthy to start the year, and on top of that, they don't really have, I don't know.
I know what you're saying, though, for sure.
Yeah, so it's based on fit. Another thing we want to add to Malik Nabers is that there's actually scuttlebutt about him pushing Marvin Harrison as the number 1 wide receiver off the board.
Yeah.
While that would be a reach to us, that isn't absolutely insane if that's exactly what you're looking for.
Right. Well, like we had talked about before, and you said that, there's no one else that can do what Malik Nabers can do in this draft class. So that's a big thing. I haven't even gotten into my Malik Nabers stuff. I'm ready to lock down and ready to go ahead and tell you why he's number 2.
Yeah, tell us why he's number 2.
He's above. Well, I've seen multiple people put Odunze above him, Daniel Jeremiah included, a guy we really like. It's just, I cannot get over the fact of this ability to just any play change the game. Like, that's my big thing. Like, 9 out of 13 games, he had 100 plus yards, 120.6 yards per game. 14 touchdowns, best PFF man coverage grade at 90.5. Here's LSU's stats, because I think that, we had Brian Thomas, we have Jaden Daniels, we have all these guys. Well, LSU, 543.5 yards per game, 45.4 points per game. They lost a lot of games, first off. With all that production, they lost games. Tell you about how bad their defense was, I guess. There's nobody in this class that has the same ability to catch the ball and all of a sudden make a touchdown, like create a touchdown after at any point in the game, anywhere on the field. Yes, he's a really great deep threat. One of the best balls that Jaden Daniels throws is the slot fade. Well, Nabers played slot and outside receiver, can do it all. His biggest problem is what Rome is really good at, in contested catches. And then, of course, Rome's biggest problem is what Nabers' problem is. So it's literally pick your poison. Who's your favorite guy? Because Marvin Harrison Jr., if a team picks Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr., it's not a bad grade, right? But all of a sudden, we could have Marvin Harrison Jr. fall to 7. He could be a Tennessee Titan, which would be the steal. Like we talked about Brock Bowers in one of our videos. He would be the steal all of a sudden. Malik Nabers should not be above him. But Malik Nabers, to me personally, is above Rome at this point. So.
Yeah, and like you said, all of them will be top 10 picks. We expect all of. A lot of times with receivers, it's like for first round receivers, it's like a 50-ish% hit rate. There's a lot of guys that are, really underwhelmed. But at the same time, a lot of guys that underwhelm, they don't have the production, but they've got the athleticism and excitement, and they're youthful, and so they're a prospect that you're gambling on. All 3 of these guys have been productive for multiple years. They have it all.
Doesn't feel like a gamble.
It doesn't feel like a gamble. So maybe somebody has a better career than the other. Like I said, it comes down to maybe fit and where you end up. Because if somebody is with Will Levis compared to Caleb Williams or Justin Herbert
or
like
New England
or Kyler Murray,
3.
Yeah, if somebody went to New England, they're probably going to have the least productive of the 3, and we'll just see how they can maximize their talents with that situation. But that's kind of how you separate like projection of their careers, is when you see where they're drafted, see who they're complimenting, and also who is throwing them the football.
Well, and I want to say one thing about Malik Nabers. Their pro day is until later on this week. So we will know what he runs 40-wise at that point.
Yeah, because he also didn't test at the combine. Odunze was the best prospect that did.
Yes.
Marvin Harrison did participate at the combine or the pro day. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Don't say that he's a diva. He was literally told by NFL teams, do not do this. There's no point. And there's not a point. Malik Nabers, there's actual debate on who's two, and then also for those that really like him, can he do something that vaults him into the first tier of the board? The Cardinals can. I know that we're highly anticipating them taking the first receiver off the board. It wouldn't put it past me if that's the route that they went. It just wouldn't. That doesn't mean that they're like Kyler screwed or a horrible decision. Like I said, it shouldn't be Malik Nabers at 1. But if he did, like, if there was any team that I wouldn't be shocked by, it would be the Chargers.
Right. I think, talking about Nabers, if he runs like a low 4.3, he checks the box. If he runs anything above like a 4.38 and it gets closer to what Rome ran, I think that's when, we need to have that conversation. But we saw it. It's game speed versus 40 speed. It's going to be very different.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that this is how I see it. If someone else told me Rome was better, I would not be mad at them.
Yeah.
They're absolutely entitled to that close opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So now going to our obvious number one, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's been the wide receiver one and has not faltered since his freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Just incredible year. He had a little bit of a step back this year, but that to me just is primarily quarterback play.
Yeah,
going from C.J. Stroud to a guy that is no longer with the team,
mm-hmm.
and transferred out. He's just incredible in every which way, and just break it down a little bit more in the stats that people might not know that jump off for him.
I mean, okay, 8 out of 12 games, 100+ yards, with a poor quarterback. 3 games of 160+ yards. Okay, he is one of the coolest guys I've ever seen because there is no part of his game that is bad, and everything is above average or elite. Contested catch, he's elite. Hands, really good, really good. Okay, release packages and route running, elite. I see him. The one thing that is funny to me, and I wrote this down, I saw him as runs routes like a 5'11", 170-pound receiver. That's how quick he is in and out of breaks.
Mm-hmm.
How he looks when he moves. Big Ten Player of the Year, Blitnikoff Award winner, first team All-American unanimously, and Heisman Trophy finalist. Just a guy that has everything, and there's a reason that he did not participate in the combine or the pro days because, like we talk about all the time, you just want to be told that people want to tear you down from the top of the mountain. They want to talk about Malik Nabers being possibly passing you. Like, no one actually thinks that. Please don't tell me people think that, because this guy has been so good consistently for so long, does all the right things, can block. He's a good blocker. He's a team player. And then, gets the ball in his hands and takes off and is, another just freak everywhere. He's just a freak. He's not even 22 years old at the beginning of the season. Just one of those guys that can't be overlooked. Generational prospect.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, he's incredible. A lot of people have kind of compared him stylistically to AJ Green, and a lot of people kind of sneezed at that because it's like AJ Green was a very, very good to great receiver.
Yeah.
But because he was with Cincinnati in their just kind of third place in the division every years, he just doesn't jump off the board compared to Julio Jones, who was in his same class that, flirted with 2,000 yards and just over the top, and he was the sexier, he had the more highlights. But AJ Green, for a decade, was a top 5 to top 7 receiver in football, and he stayed that way until injuries just kind of took over.
Well, I mean, you just got to put him in the same bracket as like Jamar Chase, Julio. Well, I guess AJ in that class, Calvin Johnson. Like just the ability wise, is like that's the place he's in. Generational prospect off. He never had an injury. That's things like that. One of my things that his ADOT was 13.1. His yards per reception was 18.1. 5-yard difference. Just one of those guys that can't be overlooked. Yeah. Just the best player. He's the best player. He's the number 1 player on our big board, and well deserving. So,
yeah, to us, it's just he's heavily tied to Arizona, but he should not fall past 5. And he would be higher if it weren't for essentially it's just solidified that the first 3 picks are quarterback. Right. But guess who's the first non-quarterback on the board?
This guy. Absolutely.
And he should be.
And the cool thing is, too, it's like, well, Arizona needs wide receiver. The Chargers, wide receiver. The Giants, wide receiver. Tennessee, wide receiver. And if he's there, all of those teams will pick him. I mean, there are teams that will probably trade up to try to get him if he drops to 5 or 6.
And Chargers should say no.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, they should
Come
say
again.
thank you, Arizona.
Yeah.
For this gift.
Yeah,
So,
the fact that Arizona, most likely, if Arizona's not picking him, it's because they traded back.
Yes. They're not going to
pass.
They should.
No way.
Yeah.
So if we really talk about it, like Minnesota coming up to get JJ McCarthy at 4 is the only way the Chargers get him. Right? Like that's it.
Logically, that should be the only reason.
But because there's no way that Arizona passes on him unless, oh my gosh, they go Malik Nabers over him. Fine. That's Arizona drafting. Not surprised, but I don't know. We'll see. We will see.
We'll see. I also think that with the Chargers, I think that they're the team to most look to trading back.
Yeah.
However, I think that they're probably on the same boat that if the only way we won't is if.
Well, yeah, we have to wait
Marvin
to see what happens at 4.
Yeah.
But when 4 hits and Arizona takes Marvin Harrison Jr., then
it's like,
okay, we're trading back to 11, give up our draft picks, or get draft picks, take all the Minnesotas, let them get JJ McCarthy, who is a project.
Or Drake May.
We will see. We shall see. Or Jaden Daniels. It's still like up in the air to me on, like I told you this the other while back. I think that Drake May has a better chance of going top 3 than Jaden Daniels falling out of Jaden Daniels has a better chance of falling out of the top 3 than Drake May just being a top 3. Right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
If Drake May goes 2, I think Jaden Daniels could be all of a sudden falling, which would be crazy to me, but whatever.
Yeah, we'll have to look after Pro Day and just kind of hear what it is. I think Jaden Daniels is pretty secure going to.
I hope so.
And Drake May is the one that is kind of all of a sudden he could be QB4.
That would be crazy.
And I know you brought that up before, but that's just something that I'm relaying. That's not something that is coming from just thin air.
No. So we've talked about this multiple times on this show.
Like Rich Eisen, who's the voice of, the NFL pretty much to me, and he has Michigan ties. Like he would not be coming right after the combine and pro day saying that JJ McCarthy to the Patriots is not just smoke and mirrors.
Yep.
And the Giants moving off of Daniel Jones, even though that they brought in Drew Lock, is not something to sneeze at. Minnesota obviously already trading for another first. Worst kept secret that they're trying to trade up, and they probably have the best package, and it's more than likely for JJ McCarthy than Drake May. If Drake May falls to 4, they'll still probably trade up, but it sounds like they want JJ. So
I don't know though. Like you got to think if Drake May's there, and you're saying basically we're trying to say that Minnesota has JJ up higher on their board than Drake May, but to me it's like maybe they just don't expect him to be there, or maybe they're just getting ready that if something happens where he falls out, they can pounce. We don't know. We're not in their ears, and there's 32 teams, and we can't follow them all, of course. But I think that most teams probably have Drake May over JJ.
Yeah,
they should.
But Drake May we'll talk a little bit more about that another time.
Yeah,
we still have over a month, just over a month till the draft. But rumors are swirling.
Yeah, a lot of things are moving parts. Players moving up. Brian Thomas. Players moving down. Troy Franklin. So we will see. Yeah, well, I'm excited. I love draft season. We'll put out our draft 2.0 in the coming week, I guess. Yeah, soon, very soon. Shoot. And so that'll be out there for everybody to see. We'll, of course, we want to get the position right more so than just the name. But there's some players we'd expect to go above others, like Marvin Harrison going first.
Yeah, and like we said, this is by far the strongest position in the draft. That's why there were 16 names, 4 honorable mentions. It's just an incredible class of receivers, and we had to cover all of them. We couldn't just name 10.
I can't cut them short. Difficult. Yeah, I couldn't cut them short.
yeah, we appreciate you guys hanging in with us. This is by far the longest positional video that we're going to have because most of them have about 5 to 7 names. This is double that, if not more. So, but yeah, thank you for helping, sticking with us. Like, subscribe, comment, talk with us a little bit about some of the big names on the board and who you would like if you needed a receiver in the top 10. That would be, it's a fun, interesting debate because it's 3 different styles of receiver.
Yeah, or who you think we put too low or too high. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't go at certain points in this draft. Like, we're not necessarily trying to rank where we think they'll go in the draft. We're ranking them based on positional value. Who's the best player?
Xavier Worthy is definitely not going to be the 10th receiver off the board.
No, he won't.
But that's just how we view him.
Yeah.
And we could be wrong. I don't think we are, but we could be.
Yeah, time will tell.
Yeah.
But we really appreciate it. Yeah, like Cam said, like, comment, subscribe, go hit Discord up and our Twitter or X and Instagram and all of them. So we really appreciate y'all being with us, joining the community.
Yeah, look out for the next one.
Bye, guys.